Welcome to the Habitat Conservation Fund Trails tutorial video. This category is for acquisition of land or trail development for the purpose of creating a path or track that brings urban residents to a park and/or wildlife environment. Let's begin reviewing the Trails Application Guide on page 1. Let's view the table of contents on page 3. Please note that all words and terms in caps are defined in the back of this application guide, beginning on page 45. Now we'll go to the HCF category chart on page 4. The Habitat Conservation Fund, referred to as HCF category chart, identifies each of the 7 project categories, including eligible funding types, cost types, species impact, and project examples. The Trails category data is in the bottom middle right column. A few examples of eligible projects in this category may include acquiring land or developing or rehabilitating existing trails that bring urban residents to natural areas or installing trailside amenities such as interpretive signs, seating, and lighting. Since we've already reviewed the overall intent of this program at the beginning of this video, let's move to page 5 to review the program overview. The annual allocation. The HCF program allocates approximately $2 million per year to the California Department of Parks and Recreation. Please refer to the HCF webpage for the current amount available for this current application cycle. The application filing date. Please disregard the information about delivering or sending applications to OGALs. All applications must be submitted online. Visit the HCF webpage for application filing deadline information, as well as the link to submit the online application. Submit the application online before 5 p.m. of the application due date. Any application submitted to our online portal after 5 p.m. will not be accepted. The grant performance period for each project is 5 years, starting on July 1st of the fiscal year, following the application due date, based on final enactment of the state budget. Please refer to the HCF webpage for the grant performance period dates. Although the current guide notes grant requests typically should not exceed $200,000, grant requests of $1 million to $2 million are encouraged for this round. However, there is no set minimum grant amount. Please request the amount needed, up to $2 million, to complete the project. Projects in all categories compete for the funding available. There is no designated amount set aside for a particular category. Required match. HCF does require match funds. Match requirement will be reviewed later in greater detail. However, please be aware of 2 key points. The first, there is a required non-state dollar-for-dollar match, and the second, the match must be spent on eligible costs under the program.
Next, let's move to page 7 to view eligible applicants. Eligible applicants include cities, counties, or districts. See the definition of districts on page 46 of this application guide to ensure your district is an eligible applicant. Please note that nonprofit organizations and state and federal agencies are not eligible applicants for the HCF program. Eligible projects. Please refer to the Habitat Conservation Fund category chart we reviewed earlier in order to view the examples of eligible project types. Ineligible projects. In the middle of page 7 is a list of ineligible projects such as projects arising from a mitigation ruling affecting another location are not eligible. Please review the specific list of ineligible projects to ensure that your proposal will be eligible. Now, let's move to page 9 to review the application process. There is no limit to the number of applications an applicant can submit. Each project site must have its own application. An application cannot include more than one category. At a minimum, the project selection criteria must be submitted by the application deadline. No revisions to the project criteria will be accepted after this date. For the remainder of the application checklist documents, such as site plans and CEQA, we can work with you after the application deadline to complete. Now let's proceed to page 10 to review the application packet checklist. Only submit items listed in the application checklist. Do not submit additional items such as letters of support. We understand the work that it takes to get these letters. Instead, focus on planning your project. All projects are reviewed based on the merits of the project using the project selection criteria only. Next, let's move to page 12 to review the application form. A fillable version is located on the HCF website. Complete all applicable fields on this form, including the approximate number of acres of the project site. Have this form signed by the applicant's authorized representative.
Let's proceed to page 14 to view authorizing resolution form. Resolutions indicate your governing body supports the project and designates an authorized representative position who will sign forms in the application package. Please use language provided in the template. Please note number 5. The resolution requires a designated position, for example, a manager, director, etc., not a person's name. This position will also be responsible for signing payment requests if awarded. Therefore, if a specific person is identified and that person moves to a new position, additional paperwork will be required to designate a new authorized representative. This is why designating a position title rather than a person is important. The authorizing resolution is a common example of a checklist item that may need extra time to complete, and that is acceptable. Include a placeholder and a time frame of when the resolution will be adopted. Now let's turn to page 15 to view the instructions for both the grant scope cost estimate form and the match requirement. This form will be used to establish the expected grant deliverables. All the recreation features and major support amenities listed on this form must be completed and open to the public before final grant payment is approved. This is what our office, auditors, and the public will expect to see upon final grant payment. Let's move to the middle of this page to view directions for establishing the grant scope. This category allows for acquisition projects or development such as rehabilitation. Therefore, phrases may be used such as acquire, develop, or rehabilitate to describe the type of work for each recreation feature and/or major support amenity. If interpretive signage would be part of the grant scope, it must be included on the grant scope cost estimate form, regardless of cost. Next, let's review the information in the middle of page 16 within the box. If the cost of an item is less than $30,000, it is a minor support amenity, such as benches. Please fold in minor support amenities and contingency costs into the related recreation feature or major support amenity, and not as a stand-alone line item. Don't list future phases beyond what will be completed with the grant plus match requirement.
Next, we'll move to the bottom of page 17 to review the match instructions. As previously mentioned, this program requires a dollar-for-dollar match. Match must be committed at the time of application. Future fundraising is not considered committed. In the middle of page 17 are eligible match sources. Eligible match sources include local funds, local general funds, and local bond funds. private funds, donated materials and services, value of donated land for acquisition projects only, and federal funds. Other state funds are ineligible match sources. Moving further down page 17, the rules regarding match are the following. Match can only be spent on eligible costs, as the same rules apply to both grant plus match. The grant and required match amounts combined cannot pay for more than 25% of pre-construction costs of the total HCF project. These are costs such as plans, construction documents, permits, etc. We'll cover the complete list in a few minutes. On page 18, there is an example of how to calculate the match amount for your project. Moving on to page 19, let's review the actual grant scope cost estimate form. Please use the applicable phrases as previously discussed, such as acquire, develop, or rehabilitate, to write your scope on this form and the associated cost. Remember, do not list contingency costs as a separate line item, but fold them into the related feature. Indicate the HCF grant and required match costs, which will equal the estimated total project cost. The total project cost listed here on the grant scope cost estimate form must be consistent with the estimated total project cost listed on the application form. All figures need to be rounded to the nearest whole dollar. Below the chart is where you'll indicate the match sources, amounts, and the date committed.
Let's go to page 41 to view the eligible cost chart. The eligible costs for this category are listed on pages 41 through 43. We encourage you to review these charts while developing your project proposal. Keep in mind, the grant performance period for each project is 5 years. Costs are not eligible outside of these dates. The target date is to complete the project and submit final documents to our office by the last working date of March, prior to the end of the grant performance period. Traveling down to page 44, we are now seeing the ineligible cost chart. Please review this list and remember that these ineligible costs cannot be charged to the grant, including indirect costs, grant writing, and costs incurred prior to the start of the grant performance period. Next, we'll go to page 20 for information on land tenure. If the project site is owned in fee simple by the applicant will submit the ownership documents, such as a deed or deed recordation number, indicating the applicant has title to the property. Let's move to page 22 to discuss if the applicant does not own the land. If the applicant does not own the land, the applicant will provide an agreement between the applicant and the landowner that at a minimum addresses all the elements of this land tenure form. Please note, the term of the agreement is either at least 10 years of land tenure for grant amounts up to and including $100,000, or at least 20 years of land tenure for grant amounts greater than $100,000. Include the completed land tenure form along with the agreement. If the land tenure agreement is a draft at the time of application, follow the instructions at the bottom of page 20 on to the top of page 21. Now we'll proceed to page 24 to view the CEQA compliant certification form. CEQA instructions are located on page 23 and outlines the 2 required items. The first is this form on page 24, which is the CEQA compliant certification. The second is either a notice of exemption or notice of determination filed with and stamped by the county clerk. Please ensure that the project description on the notice of exemption or notice of determination covers the elements described in the grant scope. No further CEQA analysis should be needed if the grant is awarded. If CEQA is not completed by the application deadline, then it's encouraged to complete and submit CEQA within 60 days after the application deadline.
Let's move to page 25. First, we have the project completion schedule. Please provide a project completion schedule that includes the proposed project's key milestones. Next is the site plan, which is required for development projects. Please upload a drawing or depiction indicating the scale, project orientation with the north arrow, and where the proposed improvements will be located. The plan should also indicate access points to the site and the location of any interpreted signs. Then we have the topographic map. Please provide a topographic map that indicates the proposed project parcel's locations. Please depict the project in relation to wildlife resources, such as vegetated areas, creeks, and other features including archaeological sites and existing roads and trails. We provided a link to the USGS topographic maps on the HCF website under the Additional Application Resources link. Then we have the project location map. Please provide a map with the city or county showing highways and street access to the project site, and with enough detail to allow a person unfamiliar with the area to locate the project. The next two items are applicable to acquisition projects. The acquisition schedule has the instructions are located on page 25. However, we are going to view the actual acquisition schedule form on page 26. The acquisition schedule form. Please fill out this acquisition schedule form outlining the acreage and parcel numbers to be acquired, the estimated acquisition date, and estimated value of each parcel to be acquired. Further instruction is below this chart with what information to include. Now, let's review the final checklist item for acquisition projects at the bottom of page 26 and the top of page 27. A county assessor's parcel map and willing seller letter. Please provide a county's assessor's parcel map showing the parcels to be acquired through fee simple or a permanent easement. The parcel numbers reflected on the map must match those listed on the acquisition schedule. Also, provide a willing seller letter from the landowner. This letter does not need to include legally binding language. A simple statement showing that the seller is willing to sell, should the grant be awarded, is acceptable. If the project is to acquire a permanent easement, please submit a copy of the proposed easement language for our review. Permanent easement agreements must guarantee the authority to use the property for the purpose specified in this application.
Let's move to the project summary on page 27. Provide a one-page summary that describes the proposed project. The summary will not be scored. Next is the project proposal. This includes all responses to the project selection criteria questions that we'll review in detail shortly. Staying on this page, let's move down to lease or agreements. Please provide a list of all leases, agreements, etc., affecting project lands or the operation and maintenance, excluding those relevant to land tenure, if applicable. Required regulatory permits. Please provide a list of existing and additional required permits, the status of each, and indicate when permit approval is expected. Examples include State Lands Commission and/or Army Corps of Engineers. Next is Land Management Plan for project lands previously acquired with HCF funds. If proposing a project on land that was previously acquired with HCF funds, describe the management plan that should include efforts to reasonably reduce possible conflicts with neighboring land use and landowner. Photos of project site. Upload photos of the project site sufficient to show the area or areas to be acquired or developed with a caption to describe and identify each photo. The final checklist item for development projects is a Conservation Corps involvement process. For these types of projects, Conservation Corps involvement in projects is encouraged to the extent achievable. The applicant is required to contact both the California Conservation Corps and the local Conservation Corps to obtain feedback on whether either can participate in the project. You'll see as we progress to the project selection criteria, how points will be awarded for projects that use the Corps' services. Now let's look at the Conservation Corps Development Plan on page 29. An updated consultation form is available at the Additional Application Resources link on the HCF webpage. Be sure to send one form to each contact. Also, upload both response forms in the online application portal.
Now let's proceed to project selection criteria on page 30. There are a total of 100 possible points. Everyone starts with 0, and points can only be gained. At the bottom of this page, you'll see the overview of criteria and the associated point values. Each criteria is followed by a descriptive rubric identifying the range of points to be gained. Let's begin with criteria number 1 on page 31. Threat or need is criteria number 1. For acquisition projects, applicants will respond to the threat. The applicant will describe any existing or potential harm or danger to the project site and overall consequence if the proposed project cannot occur. Maximum points will be awarded to projects where a significant threat to the project site exists. For development projects, applicants will respond to the need. The applicant will describe the wildlife area which is currently inaccessible to urban residents. Maximum points will be awarded to projects where significant need exists. Criteria number 2 is on page 32 for meeting the need or threat. The applicant will describe how the project will address the deficiencies identified in criteria 1. Will the applicant be providing new trails in or to a park and/or wildlife area that is currently without trails? Or will the applicant be reconstructing current trails to a park and/or wildlife area with major design or construction deficiencies to minimize environmental impacts? For acquisition projects, respond as per the planned trail use. Maximum points will be awarded to projects which significantly increase trail opportunities for urban residents to experience wildlife or minimize environmental impacts caused by eroded trails in a park and/or wildlife area. Let's move to criteria 3 on page 33. This is for site access. Per the program's legislation, the public should have access to the project site, except when access may interfere with habitat protection. Applicants will describe the plans for public access use by the time of project completion by providing details on items A through E. A is for reasonable entrance fees, parking fees, membership fees, activity fees, or no fees. B, on-site or close-by parking. C, easily accessible public transportation, bike lanes or trails. D, flexible hours, hours that accommodate target audiences. And E, solutions to any physical, financial, and/or cultural barriers and obstacles to the project site. For acquisition projects, applicants will respond and be scored based on the planned future user access. Maximum points will be given to the project sites that are accessible via all 5 of the items in A through E.
Criteria number 4, stakeholders, is on page 34. Here, the applicant will describe the efforts to involve interested parties within the last 2 years, such as community-based stakeholders, nonprofit partners, or other public agency partners if the planning and in the planning and or implementation. In response, include the A, methods used to notify interested parties of the input opportunity, B, methods used to obtain the interested parties' ideas, and C, how the interested parties' ideas were incorporated in project design or implementation. Maximum points be awarded to those applicants who make a concerted effort to involve a broad representation of interested parties in the process within the last 2 years prior to the application deadline. Criteria number 5, applicant capacity, is on page 35. For acquisition projects, applicants will respond to their knowledge and or experience of the process to A, identify the appropriate and available property, B, negotiate terms of sale with the landowner, and C, secure the appropriate agency or agent to facilitate escrow transactions. For development projects, applicants will describe their ability to complete a project as it pertains to A, designing the project to maximize sustainability, B, managing project completion schedule to ensure timely completion of milestones, and C, monitoring project outcomes to ensure they remain as intended. OGALS will also review its own records and consider the applicant's performance history with OGALS as part of the project selection process. This includes reviewing the applicant's ability to complete previous grant-funded projects on time, timely submission of project status reports and payment requests, and to adequately operate and maintain previous grant-funded sites. Maximum points to be awarded to applicants that demonstrate significant capacity to complete the project by addressing items A through C.
Next is criteria number 6 on page 36 for connections. The applicant will describe how the trail connects people to parks and or wildlife areas. The connection should be in relations to items A through C. For acquisition projects, responses should be for planned trail use. A is neighborhoods, B is for school sites, and C is employment locations. Maximum points will be awarded to projects which include all 3 locations. Next, we have criteria number 7 on page 37, which is for sustainable design features. The applicant will describe how the project will use each of the sustainable design features listed in A through G. For acquisition projects, responses should be for the planned trail use. It is important to note that if a design feature is not applicable, it should be noted as such, and this will not have an impact on the score. Maximum points will be awarded to projects which incorporate 100% of the applicable sustainable design features. Now let's move to criteria 8 on pages 37 and 38 for interpretation opportunities. The applicant will describe how the project will encourage participants to interpret the areas on or immediately adjacent to the trail. For acquisition projects, responses should be for the planned points of interest that will be on or immediately adjacent to the trail after project completion. If there is an issue of identifying the points of interest during that time period, this should be addressed in the response. It is important to state NA or not applicable to any interpretation opportunities that are not applicable, and this will not have an impact on the score. The interpretation opportunities are for A, natural, B, cultural, C, historic, and D, scenic. Maximum points will be awarded to project sites encompassing all of the applicable interpretation opportunities in A through D.
Criteria number 9, trail plan, is located on page 39. The applicant will name the adopted applicable plans and describe the project's priority in the plans. Examples include Local Master Plan and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Plan. Maximum points will be awarded to projects which satisfy a high priority need and are discussed in one or more plans. Now let's go to criteria number 10, Conservation Corps involvement on page 40. This criteria is only applicable for development projects. The applicant must contact the California Conservation Corps and the local Conservation Corps and document the practicability of the California Conservation Corps and local Corps involvement with the project. Maximum points would be awarded to an applicant who can contact both the California Conservation Corps and the local Conservation Corps and provides the completed response forms from both organizations and the contact results in Conservation Corps participation. Since we've already reviewed the eligible and ineligible costs on pages 41 through 44, we'll move to the program definitions beginning on page 45. During our review of the table of contents, this list of program definitions was mentioned. Remember that all words and terms in caps are defined here. Please use this list to familiarize yourself with this program's defined terms. This concludes the Trails tutorial video. Thank you for listening.